Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Senior Marketing Specialist today to talk about one of our newest divisions, Acquisition Pathways. I'm thrilled to have you here this morning. It's been a while since we've done one of these webinars, so I'm excited to get back into this topic and chit chat about it. Before you dive into AEP, that way you kind of be thinking about it. We know a lot of this topic, especially with all the new things that are happening in the market. It's a good topic to bring up now. So we're going to chit chat about that Acquisition Pathways division today. My name is Sadie Palmer. I am the team leader of training and education. And today I get to host the real star of the show here. This is Dan Mangus. He is the Vice President of Growth and Development here at Senior Marketing Specialist. He has worn a lot of hats here. He's worn a lot of hats in the industry, but right now he is the head of that Acquisition Pathways division, and there's really nobody better for it. I'll let him kind of describe a little bit his career, and that way you guys get the full picture of why he is literally the best person to be heading this up. But he is an author, he's a regular columnist, he is in magazines regarding it, he's a speaker all over the nation about Medicare, and he's highly regarded for this topic in this industry. So thrilled to have you. But Dan, can you start us off with just telling us about how you ended up where you're at now?
And again, thank you everybody for taking some time. Right now, it's got to be such a crazy time for you to take a little bit of time out. So we'll hope you will be able to take away a few points. And obviously, anything that we don't cover, don't have time to cover today, I'm more than happy to try to address on an individual basis. So just let me know. But as far as my career goes, I started my first insurance agency when I was 18 and went from 0 clients knocking on doors to by the time I ended up selling my agency 30 years later, I had a little over 6,400 clients. And so I definitely can empathize with you as far as how it feels to run and own an agency, sit in front of clients, deal with the things that they have to deal with and the complexities that they have to deal with. And so, but about 15 years ago, I sold my agency and went on to started working with Senior Marketing Specialist, which was one of my FMOs, came on board to head up their sales division. And through that, have had the opportunity over these years to work with thousands of agencies across the country and kind of see what they were doing. So it was a really different thing for me to kind of peek behind the curtain, if you will, and see what the other side of our industry looked like too. But through all of that, I've obviously seen a lot of different individuals transition like I did from one role to another role, from working in the industry, not working in the industry, a lot of different things that people go through in our business.
Awesome. Yeah, Dan is one of those people that whenever he is in office and he has something today, everybody shuts up and we listen. All the people that I work under have been trained by him. They know everything they know because of him. So yes, perfect person to have here. But Dan, let's go ahead and dive in to kind of explaining what Acquisition Pathways is for the people new here that I've never heard of this division. Sometimes it can be a best kept secret of SMS. That's especially this time of year because we're all thinking about other stuff. But let's go ahead and dive into Acquisition Pathways. So we know that there are the way that this is structured, there are 3 pillars or so that we say about Acquisition Pathways. So could you talk about what the 3 pillars are of this division, and then also talk about the name is Acquisition Pathways, that not pathway. So what are those 3 different pathways that you can take as well? How many times can I say the word pathways in one sentence?
Okay, well, I think when we were looking at how to title what we were going to do, it was very difficult because, for one thing, acquisition is kind of a loose description of transitioning an individual's client working relationships. Sometimes that's through an actual purchase and dollars change hands and things like that. Normally that's what the situation is, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's through a referral agreement or other arrangements we might make. And the reason was pathways with an S is because there is absolutely no single situation I've ever dealt with that is exactly like the other. So there's no cookie cutter type thing. There's some basic principles of it that we work with, but there's a lot of different ways a person can handle a transition. But essentially there's 3 main pillars that we look at. One, and anybody needs to look at actually, one is emotional. Selling by definition is a transfer of emotion. And so because of that, you get very close with your clients and you have a good working relationship with them. In fact, we don't really want to acquire any agencies ourselves that people haven't done that. I mean, it's really important. But because of that, you're very vested into it. And it's a very personal type thing. And sometimes, after many years of doing it, it literally defines who we are. And so that emotional side of the whole situation, yours, your clients, your families, your staff, everybody that's involved, has to be looked at as a very real part of the whole process, because it can enable it or it can derail it. The second is organizational. When you look at an agency or an organization, they are an agency's operation, if you will, or their practice, they have to have organizational tools put in place, systems put in place. So how are they keeping track of their clients? How are they communicating with their clients? How often? What does that look like? What kind of needs analysis are being done? What kind of carrier contracts are put in place, or state licenses? Or how is the business actually structured? And I think we're probably going to touch on that just a little bit later too, is an important aspect of making transition possible. And then obviously financial. So you have emotional, organizational, and then financial. And with financial, there's a lot of things that take into consideration. What does your business block look like? When are you trying to make a transition? What time of year actually has a lot to do with the financial side? What kind of financial records are you keeping or not keeping? And what's your mix of business look like? Including not just policy type, but the age of the clients and the age of the policies. So there's a lot of different financial things to look at as we dive in, but those three categories, a much deeper dive into each one of those three is really critical for anybody to look at when they're looking at the transition of any kind.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that whenever Acquisition Pathways years ago was introduced to our team internally before we rolled it out, and you were talking about the three different pillars, the organization and the financial part, it was like, yeah, I understand those, but that emotional pillar I think is so huge. And I love that that's something that you guys make a big enough deal to make it a pillar up there with the organizational in the financial as well, because it's so true. People put their blood, sweat, and tears. They spend time away from their families for 4th of the year. It's a big deal, and it's such a sensitive topic. You get so close, those clients become like family, and you take care of sometimes generations. And so that is a lot to let go. So I personally, I absolutely love that you all acknowledge that side of it, just as much as you acknowledge all the other stuff. And of course, you've sold an agency, you started from door knocking all the way up to, selling the business. So absolutely love that. But speaking of the three different pillars, and you also mentioned that anybody, the client can look like anybody here, but kind of dive into that a little bit. What does the typical AP client look like? Because there might be somebody on here who's like, well, I'm not exactly sure how I want to transition my business. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I'm a right fit for this. So if you were to have a phone call with someone and answer the question of what does a typical AP client look like, how would you answer that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the first thing I would do is, just like when we sit down with our clients, we want to do a needs analysis with them. We need to see what their objectives are, what their needs are. In other words, what's critical, what do they not have any choice about, and then what are their capabilities. And because you can only do what you can do. They say you can only do all you can do, but do all you can do. And that's essentially what we try to figure out. So for some individuals, their objective in working with us is to grow their business through acquisition. And that's really built for somebody who has a strong system of maintaining clients already, and has a willingness to commit to a long-term growth. What is their actual capacity for doing that? Realistically, do they have the time, or are they already too busy now? And they think it would be great to have 500 more clients, but all of a sudden, boom, they're not too happy that they got 500 more clients because they don't know what to do. So can they do that? And we kind of work through all of those things and look at each potential stress point as to whether that kind of growth is something that they want to do. And by the way, every agent grows by acquisition. Sometimes it's one client at a time, but sometimes it's 500 clients at a time. So you have to look at things like, are you familiar with your acquisition cost? What are you paying right now, essentially, when you break down all of your expenses to get a new client? And then what is their actual lifetime value? So you can kind of bump up against, here's what I paid to get it, here's what I can expect once I have it, and this is what it's going to cost me to maintain that. So that's if a person is trying to do that. If somebody is looking to exit the business because of whatever kind of circumstance they might have, that could be they want to change the focus of their business, and maybe they're not going to be in this particular field, so they want to sell that particular block of business, have somebody take care of that for them so they can focus on maybe, if they're Medicare and financial and they want to focus just on financial, that may be something that they're doing. Some individuals have health conditions, family situations, and some individuals want to be able to retire and actually enjoy the success they've worked so hard to get. And I think that's what all of us really want to do. But then the actual activity of doing that feels and looks different. So if somebody wants to kind of hand that baton off to somebody else, they're going to have to find the right person to hand it off so that they can run into that other person, their client in Walmart, and not have to worry about it. But and then there's also merging. An individual might choose to merge their practice to enhance what they're doing with the activities of another organization or another agent. And so that can be done well, but there's also a lot of details to look at that, because like any relationship that you go into, you want to go into it with your eyes wide open, and you don't want to get broadsided with things that you didn't think to ask, or you didn't know what you didn't know, and those kind of things. And so for us as an organization, we've helped, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of agents and agencies go through transitions. We've seen things that cause issues. And so we might be able to say, hey, listen, did you think about this? That's the kind of thing that you want to do when you're merging. So, buying, selling, or merging. But for us, a typical AP client, like one that we would actually acquire, and we have, just so the audience knows, we do have the capacity to purchase agencies and do regularly purchase agencies. And we fold those particular agencies into our career side so that we have agents that actually work for us to take care of those clients. That way you are able to say, okay, this is what I want to happen with these clients, and we can make sure that that happens. I want them to be met with at home. I want to be able to meet with them in an office. I want them to, different, whatever it is. We want to make sure that we're able to control that. But the big thing, Sadie, honestly, is creating a win-win situation for everybody. Everybody has to be able to walk away from this feeling comfortable financially. So we do professional valuations and things like that. So there's no question about the actual value of an agency or a block of business, and then full transparency by both parties so that everybody can be open. We always put a confidentiality agreement in place so that everybody can kind of relax and share information so that we get the job done properly with full disclosure, and there's not surprises for any of the parties in anything, and create documents that are necessary in order to create comfort like that as well.
So following down this retirement sort of pathway, I know that as far as timelines go and everything like that, with the acquisition pathway, the timelines that happen whenever someone is planning to retire, people can have different expectations. And I know that a lot of that depends on what the business looks like, the organization in the background, all that sorts of things. So if someone is considering retirement, what are some things that they should think through beforehand to help them sort of mentally prepare and organizationally prepare and financially prepare for that transition?
Yeah, I think if you're thinking of retirement, it is important. You said mentally prepare. I think you have to get your head around it. I think that's so important, and probably the most difficult. That's the reason why you see some individuals want to work literally for the rest of their life, and you'll see agents that are in their 90s, I do work with agencies that are in their 90s and they just want to continue working, but they have to have a plan in place in case something happens to them, obviously. But I think that an expression I heard one time was never make a promise without a plan. And we make promises to our clients. Don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure that you're cared for. Well, part of making sure that they're cared for is making sure that they're cared for even if you can't do it. So what happens? If you got a diagnosis of something, or if you had a situation happen and you couldn't take care of that client anymore, but you really, really want to, you have to have a plan in place. So if you're preparing for any type of transition or succession, and the terms are kind of dependent, but I think of it as transitions because that can be just about anything. But you have to start almost micromanaging your business a little bit to be able to see, can somebody step in here and do what I'm doing and know these people without me being there? And how does that happen? I have to have systems in place. I have to have laid out exactly the details about that person. And I'm not talking about their name and address. They can get that off the book of business reports. I'm talking about who they are. Can they actually take care of this relationship, not this policy, and step into that role? So if you think that all the way through and just kind of pretend, okay, like for instance, I always encourage anybody, if they're selling their agency, pretend like you're buying your agency. What would you want to know if you were buying something? What do you want to know if you're buying a house? You have an inspector come in, right? You start looking at all the details. You pay attention to way more than you do the stuff at your house that you're living in. But then when you go to sell a house, you feel a little bit different about it when you're selling a house. So picture from both sides. They give you empathy from both sides of the aisle, and dive into the details with that.
Awesome. So that totally makes sense. If I'm an agent, that totally makes sense that I need to be mentally preparing for that and thinking about succession and thinking about retirement, all that sorts of things. But I know that you guys also put a lot of emphasis on making sure that people who are just now starting in the business need to be thinking about this as well. So could you kind of explain a little bit why, if you're just now starting in the business, why it's important day one to think about succession planning?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that we are in the business of is helping people manage risk. So number one, when you're meeting, if you're in the group health insurance business, do you encourage people to contribute to a 401k when they're 20? Do you encourage them to buy life insurance at a young age? Why? The retirement is more than likely going to be a long way off. The potential for a person dying is statistically way higher when they're older, right? But there's still stuff that happens. So you want to always be ready for those transitions. So just do the same thing to yourself that you do with your clients. Prepare. And any good plan is built on a solid foundation. So if you want to have a good business plan, then you put a good business structure in place. Keep in mind that for a transition to happen with a lot of the carriers, you have to be able to move it from a corporate principal to another corporate principal. That is big because a tax ID is way easier to move, and for some, the only way you can. A social security number is not. Plus, a social security number goes away. If a person goes away, a tax ID doesn't. You can just change the principle of that. And so if you're brand new, use the tools online like the SBA.gov and look at the ways that you can build your corporation. But build a corporation. My recommendation: go in business on purpose with a purpose. So build a business plan, have an operations manual, which, believe me, I was a starving agent for the first couple of years. I know what it's like. You're like, yeah, that sounds really cool. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, I got to eat this week and pay my utilities. You are in business though. And the faster that you go into business, the better off you are. Building budgets, building for expansion, understanding that when you first start in the insurance business, one of the first things you do is you take out insurance. Well, first you do your licensing, build your business structure, and then you start contracting with carriers. So you have carrier choice becomes extremely important. Carrier contract, what's your contract look like? Does it allow for transition? Does it allow for expandability? And then with that contract, set up your commission flow properly. Advanced commissions can be nice and maybe necessary in some circumstances, but remember, those are considered debt. So when you go to transition or sell your agency, advanced commissions are debt. So you want to be cautious with that from the very beginning. And then make sure that your record keeping and systems are spot on from the very beginning. It's so much easier if you install a client management system of some kind in to keep your data. And then be very cautious about your budget with your financial commitments and things that you make, because anybody who acquires your business under any circumstance also acquires the good with the bad. And so you want to make sure that you've done that. And then the last thing I would say that a lot of people don't think about is, one, choose your clients carefully. You know, the clients, don't complain about your clients because you chose them, you know what I mean? So that's, you gotta, who are you gonna market to? What kind of product are you gonna try to attract? What are you gonna get good at so that you get that kind of policy? And then manage your client expectations so that the clients, whoever acquires your agency or takes over in any circumstance, can meet the expectations that you've set, and they're not unrealistic. So a new agent can very often overpromise what they will do for clients, and then they just can't keep that once they get bigger. You know, so once they get 300 or 400 or 500 clients, it's really hard to do the same stuff. Because I know whenever I first started selling, if somebody said that they would buy a policy, I probably would have mowed their yard or done anything they asked me to. But you know, after you get a number of clients, that's not real anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, we have just a few more questions. We have a really good question in the chat box that I'm going to save for the very end, but feel free to ask your questions in there now while we're here for a few more minutes. But Dan, thinking about the sort of business side as far as not just the clients that you have underneath you, but if someone is wanting to add agents underneath them, what are some things that they need to consider about that process?
That's a really good question, because a lot of times people feel like in order to be successful in our business, it means that they've added more agents to their business. And sometimes that can be true. But you can be extremely successful in this business and never have added another agent to work with you. I normally am a big believer in adding administrative assistants first, long before you add any agents, because you want to maximize your capacity. It's like a physician. Yes, there are times whenever you want to add physician to the practice and build a clinic, but a lot of times before you do that, as a physician, you want somebody greeting your patients. You want somebody taking their blood pressure. You want somebody doing the blood tests. You want all this kind of stuff. If you did it all, there's only so much you could do, and just another doctor in the building is not necessarily going to grow your business. So maximize administrative assistance first. But if you add an agent, be very, very clear from the very beginning exactly what your expectations are. And don't think you're going to find your exact duplicate, because nobody does it like you do. Everybody's different. So don't expect perfection. They won't expect perfection of you, but don't expect perfection of them either. But you do have to protect your brand. And so if that's the case, that means that you have to make sure that they understand the compliance that you expect from them, the client service that you expect from them. You have to lay out very clearly who owns the client and who owns the commissions. So for instance, if you set up a contract and they're just assigning the commissions to you, you don't own that client more than likely, and you definitely don't own the commissions, because they could just unassign those commissions. So if you actually went to sell your agency and several of the agents were just assigning their commissions to you, unless there are other documents that support that, that is absolutely going to not be something that you can transition. And then leads and referrals. You're going to probably have a block of clients that are generating referrals. And so if they work one of those referrals, do you compensate them differently? And then one last thing I would mention too is obviously you want to do things in writing, but be careful about your splits, commission splits, because a commission split, number one, you need to make sure you don't just say, we split the commissions 60-40 or 50-50 or whatever, because you have to define what commissions you're talking about. Are you talking about agency commissions? Are you talking about agent level commissions? You know, be very specific about that. And then once you do outline that, make sure that there's an understanding of what the vesting is for that. Because whoever comes in and acquires your business, let's just say you're super generous and you wanted to give an 80-20 split to an agent. Well, an agency coming in to acquire you more than likely is not doing 80-20 splits. And so if they're going to try to match that up and take care of your agent for you and absorb them into that purchase, they're going to have to try to either match up to that, or they're going to probably lose that agent if they say, no, we do 50-50. You used to do 80-20. Now we do 50-50. That's going to be hard. So set from the very beginning what you feel like is a transferable and realistic split on commissions and ways of handling your operation.
Yeah, I think the theme here is, you know, whenever you're starting, start with the end in mind sort of thing. And that even goes down all the way to those details that people really probably don't even think about, of like, if I add a downline, what I'm paying them and how that might affect the next person that they go under and how that affects the agent. So yeah, absolutely. So the last question that I have for you, Dan, here is, how can acquisition help build an agent's business? Senior marketing specialists at our core, what we do is help agents succeed, help agents grow. So of course, even the division that helps them successfully transfer out of the business also has ways that we can help them grow their business as well. So could you kind of talk about how this division can help people grow their business as well?
Yeah, I think that it is important to remember that if you have a business that has a capacity for growth, you've made the space for you to be able to have another block of clients. Number one, know how many you can actually add, and don't put yourself in a position where you are going to have to break your service model and break what actually makes you money, or take your eye off your current clients to take care of these new ones, because all of a sudden you can't take care of your old clients, you got these new. So make sure you have that capacity for growth, but then rethink what an acquisition might look like. So often people think of acquisitions as these big transactions that are just multi-million-dollar transactions. And granted, there definitely are some that are like that, but a huge number are not buying the business at all. It's buying the block of business. So if you buy somebody's block, they may only have 50 or 100 clients, or maybe even less or more. You know, I mean, it's that size is definitely surprising to a lot of people. There's a lot of agents out there who have a block of 50 or 100 clients that would be perfect just to kind of fold into your agency. And those kind of acquisitions are nice ways for you to grow, because it gives you new clients. It often takes you into new product lines that you're not necessarily in. It gives you a new centers of influence and new people to get referrals from. Very often when I work with agencies, they have sold maybe just the core product to an individual. So they have just sold a Medicare supplement or just sold a Medicare Advantage to them or something like that. And you have all this room for adding additional programs, from cancer insurance to hospital indemnity plans to financial products to you name it. And you might be in the PNC business as well, or whatever other businesses that you might be in. That lifetime value of a client or a relationship to you may be vastly different from the acquisition of this policy over here that you purchased for X number of dollars. And so there's sometimes huge opportunity in that. And then the geographic expansion is also something that's kind of interesting. Very often those clients will be in areas that maybe you weren't in before. Maybe they open up a new state to you, or maybe they open up a new county, or but at very least, you're going to open up a lot of new interesting opportunities. And if it's a bigger agency, you may open up new locations. You may open up new agents that are now underneath you, and you may, bring on new staff that you might need or want. So there's a lot of different different things that it could allow you to expand without having to do it organically.
Awesome. Well, Dan, we could talk here forever, all day about what Acquisition Pathways does, but we want to be respectful of people's time because, of course, we are diving into AEP here soon. So let's go ahead and open it up for questions. We do have one here. Please feel free to throw in your questions, comments, concerns in there. Otherwise, we will get out of here. But Dan, we have a question here from an agent saying, been procrastinating to form an LLC for a while now. I have a decent book of business that includes life insurance, Medicare Advantage, and supplements, and hospital indemnity. Sounds like most agencies form an LLC and file as an S Corp. Is there a reason to not follow that same direction?
No, I think that's an excellent direction to take. And you need to realize that it's not something that's just going to snap your fingers and happen. Because once you form the corporation, then you have to start moving all of your contracts to that corporation. So it's kind of like building a trust. You know, is it a good idea to have a trust? Yes, in a lot of situations, it's a good idea to have a trust. But a trust is nothing unless you assign things to that trust. And so it's the same way with a corporation. You build a corporation so that it has that solidity and sometimes the tax benefits of it. You can talk to your accountants about that. But it allows you to then start assigning things to it. And in our business, the primary thing that you assign to that corporation is your insurance carrier contracts. And so that needs to happen, and that does not happen overnight. That can be a 6-month or longer process. So don't feel like you're just going to flip a switch with it, but it's a tremendously good endeavor to take in order to be able to tie everything to a corporation. The transition from a corporation, whenever it's needing to be acquired or anything, you know, transitioning to another person inside your organization or whatever might be the situation, is vastly, vastly different for a corporation versus an individual. So yes, it's worthwhile. That's a good path, in other words.
Awesome. Dan, the last question that I have for you before we get out of here is, if someone is interested in having a conversation with you, getting the ball rolling here with whatever pathway they decide, how can they contact your team? What does that initial phone call look like? Who will they speak to? All that sorts of stuff.
I'll be happy to have a conversation personally with anybody that wants to have that conversation. I think the best way of probably contacting me is either just give me a call at our office. It's 800-689-2800, or you can email me personally. It's dan.mangus@smsteam.net. And so you can reach out to us that way. You're welcome to text me. My personal cell number is 573-614-2140, which I don't know if you can believe that I just gave that out on a webinar, but still, yeah, whatever. We're all friends here. You're welcome to text me or call me, and the biggest thing is to start the conversation. You know, it's, who knows what kind of questions or direction that we might need to take, but at least explore what's going on with it so that you're somewhat prepared. The more of a pathway that you have, the better. That's the reason why we talk about when you started. But let's just say you're 70 and you're thinking, okay, well, I might be able to do this for a couple more years, but you know, use those 2 years as a good pathway. I mean, as much runway as you can to take off, the better off you are. And the bigger of an organization you have, just like a bigger plane takes a longer runway, the same way with an organization. The bigger agency that you have, the more runway you need in order to be able to make that transition. And so let's just get the conversation started and see what direction it needs to go based on your individual circumstances.
Awesome, love it. All righty, Dan, well, let's go ahead and get everybody out here. Do you have anything else to say before we head out?
No, other than this, congratulations to anybody that's built a block of business and working with their clients here, because I don't think you'd be on this webinar if you hadn't built it. And the only reason that you built it was by establishing a lot of trust with a lot of people. And I know for a fact that's hard work, and it's gotten to be even harder with all the hoops that we're being made to jump through right now, and the difficulty in business. It's changed a lot, but just want to congratulate everybody for what they built, because it's not an easy business, that's for sure.
Awesome. Well, if anybody would like to contact us, please give our office a call. Email Dan. I put his email address there in the chat box. You will receive a follow-up email after this, so you'll know how to contact us. You'll have the recording and everything like that. But thank you all so much for joining us. Dan, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. But we'll go ahead and get out of here. Thank you.